Hi, I'm Old Norse specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford. As a former faculty member in Scandinavian studies at universities such as UCLA, Berkeley, and the University of Colorado, I have been making YouTube videos for about a decade about subjects such as Scandinavian languages, runes, Old Norse literature, etc. And one subject that I have never dealt with a whole lot on here is Greenland, but Greenland, of course, has been in the news a fair amount recently, now in January 2026. So what I want to do here is just provide a little bit of the Old Norse context around Greenland, right? How is it that Norsemen came to be established there, and what does that have to do with the fact that Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark today? So a big part of what I want to do, what I always want to do, is provide some context to folks. I mean, after all, most of us don't live in Greenland or anywhere close to Greenland. Obviously, I live in an environment fairly different from there. And the distances involved are um, difficult to get a handle on sometimes because famously the Mercator projection makes Greenland look bigger on a two-dimensional map than Africa. It's not that big, but it is huge. It is bigger than Alaska. Here are some interesting comparisons. If we place the Old Norse Eastern settlement, which is close to the present-day municipality Kasiarsuk, and forgive me, I don't speak Greenlandic. I've been getting to know it a little bit better, but I obviously don't have anything close to a native speaker's proficiency with pronunciation. I'm going to do my best job with a fair understanding of linguistics, but I know this isn't going to sound like a native speaker. But anyway, if we take Kasiarsuk, or the Norse Eastern settlement, as equivalent to Denver in terms of projecting distances, just because that's you know a reference point that I get and maybe some of my American audience gets. Then from there to the main coast is about the same distance as the distance from Denver to Mexico City. So, occasionally you see claims that Vinland, the furthest south point that's recounted in the Norse Sagas as a place that they settled, um, is actually on the main coast, but it's a pretty long way to go. And there's a lot of Canada between there and Greenland. Probably Vinland is Newfoundland, right? It's the area around Lanso Meadow, which is a known archaeological Norse site. I've talked about this in other videos. Okay, from there to Lanso Meadow, that probable location of Vinland, is 761 miles. That's roughly the distance from Denver to Hermosillo, Mexico, which is somewhat close to the Gulf of California coast. From the eastern settlement to the Norse western settlement, which is fairly close to the present day Greenlandic capital of Nuuk, that is like going from, that's 280 to 90 something miles. That's like going from Denver to Riverton, Wyoming, roughly. Again, a reference point that works for me, maybe not for everybody, but still, 290 some or so miles. To go from there to the furthest north evidence of Norse activity, the Kingitorsuaq runestone, which I discussed in a video about the surprisingly large amount of runic material from Greenland, is to go about 860 something miles, which Calgary, Alberta is a little bit further than that from Denver, Colorado. And to go to the northern tip of Greenland from uh, the Norse Eastern settlement. No reason to think they went quite that far, but that would be like going from Denver to Yellowknife in the Northwestern Territories of Canada. Now, Yellowknife is then right about the latitude of Nuuk, and so you can see then that Greenland really kind of encapsulates just how huge the Arctic is, because then there's another whole, Denver to Yellowknife past Yellowknife, right? It sort of doubles the length of the Arctic, and that doesn't quite get you to the North Pole. So this is a huge landmass, and I think that's worth keeping in mind. The Norse were operating in the southwestern corner of it, which is and was the most habitable by human beings. That's where it's a little bit warmer. You actually have some exposed vegetation. You can feed cattle and sheep and things like that. And they established themselves, broadly speaking, in an eastern settlement, which is really south rather than east of the western settlement. That was the first and longest lasting Norse settlement in the Middle Ages. Again, that's close to what today is called Kasiarsuk. And then there's the western settlement, which is somewhat close to the present-day capital of Nuuk. That was established a little bit later, also didn't last quite as long. The Norse came up against the Little Ice Age, which was intensifying in the 1300s, worsening all the way through the 1500s, and we really don't have a reason to think that the original Norse settlers' descendants were there any later than 1500. 1500 may even be a little bit too late. But curiously, when they showed up, that southwestern shore of Greenland wasn't inhabited by the Inuit. I'm going to use Inuit, I think, in a fair way as a broad term for people speaking Inuit languages. There's, of course, lots of different subgroups here, and the group archaeologists call the Thule people are the ones who would come a couple centuries after the Norse down the western coast from the northwestern coast and found the population that's ancestral to the population of Greenlanders today. Now, those people go, again, I'm not a native speaker, by the term Kalaalleq, something along those lines. That term may actually be descended from what the Norse called them, Skrælingr, just adapted to the different sound structure of their own language. And they call the country Kalaallit Nunaat, that is then the land of the Greenlanders, the land of the Kalaalleq. In Old Norse, the land was famously given its name Greenland by its original Norse settler, Eric the Red. Now, Eric the Red is almost certainly actually a historical figure. He is testified to in Íslendingabók, written by Ari Thorgilsson in Iceland around 1140. And Ari claimed that he knew someone who talked to someone who settled Greenland with Eric the Red, and Ari is pretty strict about sourcing his historical statements, so that seems probably true. And according to Íslendingabók, where's this interesting quote? Where did I write this down? Han gaf nafn landinu og kallaði Grönland og hvað menn það mundu husa þangat varara landið ætti nafn gott. Þeir fundu þar mannavistar bæði austur og vestur á landi og keiplabrót og steinsmíði. Það af því má skilja að þar hafði þess konar þjóð farið Vínland hefur byggt og Grönlendingar kalla skrælingja. En það var hann tók byggja landið 14 vetrum eða 15 fyrir en kristni komi hér á Ísland, að því svo taldi fyrir Þorkeli Gillisinni og Grönlandi sjálfur fylgdi Eiríki ráða út. So he gave a name to the land and called it Greenland, and said that it would encourage men to make the journey to the land if it had a good name. And there they found the remains of men, both in the east and the west, not corpses, but things left by men, both east and west on the land, and like fragments of canoes and stone structures. And from that, they were able to understand that the kind of people were there who had settled in Vinland, and which are called Skrælingjar by the Greenlanders. And when he began to settle the land, it was 14 or 15 winters before Christianity came here on Iceland, according to what was told to Thorkel, or according to the calculation of Thorkel Gellison in Greenland, who himself followed Eric the Red out. Now, Iceland is Christianized in the year 1000, so that is then saying that 985 or 986 is when Eric the Red led the settlement of Iceland, and that's of Greenland, and that's presumably then speaking not to when he first saw it, but when he first led people back. Because according to his saga, the Saga of Eric the Red, which you can read in an English translation in the Penguin volume called the Sagas of Icelanders, available on Kindle 2, together with Greenlander Saga, which is a little bit more realistic and a slightly earlier saga. He was exiled from Iceland after a murder and had to spend 3 years away. And so he had gone west to Greenland to explore it because there had been rumors about a land west of Iceland. They knew there was something out that way. Much earlier, a man named Gunnbjorn, son of Ulfr in Kraka, Ulfr the Crow, Wolf the Crow, had been driven that way and seen land out that way. So he knew there was something out there, and he had come back after his forced 3 years of exile to bring, I believe it says in the Saga of Eric the Red, 25 ships full of settlers from Iceland to Greenland to settle it, although only 14 of those ships actually made it. Again, if you want to read those sagas, English translations that I would call, I would give B's to. I don't know. You know, we all have our different translation philosophies. I am a translator of Old Norse myself, but you know, there's some translations in that Penguin volume, which you can get on Kindle. And of course, I've made a lot of videos about the exploration of North America from Greenland and what the sagas say about that. I've just spent a little bit less time talking about Greenland because it turns out more of my audience is in Canada, i.e. Vinland and Markland, than is in Greenland. So I get asked about that a lot more. By the way, this term for the indigenous people of Greenland and North America, Skrælingr, we don't really know what that means. There is a similar term that can be found in Norwegian dialects as sort of an insult, and it might be related ultimately to the root in scream. Oddly enough, it might also be, so it might be like, you know, the screamers. Probably a reference to, you know, speaking a language they couldn't understand. Another possibility is that it's related to scroll, therefore from the same root as English scroll, meaning something made out of leather, referring to all of the materials that they have made out of leather. I believe it was Fontesquieu who first proposed that, and I think that's a pretty attractive possibility. Now, we have Icelanders, therefore, you know, culturally Icelandic or Norwegian people settling in Greenland beginning in, according to Íslendingabók, 985 or 986. Now, they are maintaining their own affairs for a while, just like the Icelanders do. But just like Iceland in the 1260s, they submit to the Norwegian crown. Right, so Icelanders had often been people fleeing the consolidation of Norway under one crown by Harold Fairhair in the late 800s, early 900s. But 350 years later, their descendants resubmit to the same crown that they had been, that their ancestors had been fleeing. And the Greenlanders do the same. Actually, it's 1 year apart. Greenland becomes part of the Kingdom of Norway in 1261 and Iceland in 1262. Now, in 1380, the Norwegian crown passes under the Kalmar Union, which makes it effectively under the Danish crown. The Kalmar Union unites the crowns of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, with Denmark being the most powerful partner. Effectively, all of these countries become governed from Copenhagen. Now, the Norwegian crown had had a monopoly on trade to and from Greenland, and this was a somewhat lucrative trade. The Greenlanders provided tusks from narwhals and walruses, which were used for all the things that ivory would be used for from elephants. In fact, one speculation about what might have harmed the Norse Greenlandic colony is that better access to elephant ivory in Europe made the narwhal and walrus ivory that they could provide less economically lucrative. They provide gerfalcons, if that's how you say that in English, what is called jagtfalk in Scandinavian. That very cool kind of falcon that was a very prestigious thing to be used in falconry. They provide polar bears for royal entertainment, as memorably encapsulated in the Norwegian, or excuse me, Icelandic story Auðunar Þáttur Vestfirðska. They provide walrus hide, which apparently is good for making rope. And of course, in return, they get things like iron for making tools and timber, although it's also possible that they're going to Markland, which is to say the coast of Labrador, to get their own timber sometimes. But with the Norwegian crown assuming a trade monopoly on Greenland, the Greenlanders are relying on this Norwegian supply ship coming regularly. And once Norway and these island territories become part of the Kingdom of Denmark, the authorities in Copenhagen seem to sort of lose track of these distant colonies. They become largely forgotten and neglected, and it looks like the supply ship, trade ships, stop coming. Now we hear a little bit in the 1400s about Icelanders in contact with Greenlanders. The last written record of anything happening in Greenland is actually from, it's an Icelander's copy of a sort of marriage certificate from Greenland from 1409. And the language of the certificate is semi-famously not exactly in Icelandic or Norwegian of the time. It looks a little bit different. It spells, for example, the preposition till as thil, implying that they're stopping the distinction between the t and th sound, which of course is becoming characteristic of Norway too at around that time. But there's a few other characteristics that just don't look Norwegian or Icelandic and probably attest to a lost Greenlandic accent of Norse, if you will, as do some of the many runic inscriptions from the time. And it's probably right to suspect, again, that sometime in the late 1400s, there are no more descendants of the original Norse settlers of Greenland in Greenland. Hey folks, we'll be back to your regular presentation in a moment, but for right now, I'm here at Grimfrost World Headquarters Longhouse with Johan Hegg, and I just want to remind you that if you have Viking needs, you have a Viking supplier. Grimfrost really cares about getting things right, and if you need replica, well, anything, right? Shields, helmets, weapons, board games, cool t-shirts, hats, all sorts of accessories like that. You can get them at grimfrost.com together with my books, and they ship just about anywhere in the world. So check them out. It does help support the channel. By the way, there's an interesting discussion of Greenland in Konungs Skuggsjol, a Norwegian document from the 1200s that's supposed to educate a up-and-coming king's son in the ways of the world. And it discusses the wonders of Greenland, including the Northern Lights. Apparently, the Northern Lights, by implication, are unknown in Scandinavia at this time. My understanding is this might actually be right, that something about atmospheric conditions made the Northern Lights common in Greenland, but not in Scandinavia back then. It also weirdly mentions that Greenlanders don't know what bread is, and that their diet consists entirely of hunting reindeer, walruses, bears, and seals for food, which is somewhat borne out by archaeological evidence, as I understand. Although another thing that really stands out in the archaeological record, again, as I understand it, is increasing evidence for a really impoverished diet among Norse Greenlanders as the settlement wanes toward its concluding years. So there are probably no Norse speakers in Greenland for about 300 years, from sometime in the 1400s to sometime in the 1700s. We don't know exactly what happened to them. This is a subject that has fascinated some people. I don't find the specific question all that fascinating, but of course there are books that have dealt with this at length. The Frozen Echo, Collapse by Jared Diamond. There's all kinds of possibilities here that the environment worsens. It's getting colder because of the Little Ice Age. They fail to adapt because they won't adopt Inuit hunting techniques. Um, they are perhaps violently attacked. There's no real archaeological evidence for Inuit attacks on Norse settlements, but there could have been some kind of violent confrontations, or could even be violent confrontations toward the end of this period with other Europeans as um, European powers are beginning to move into the New World. It's just not really known. Um, but certainly the Western settlement and then the Eastern settlement are depopulated. And then the population along that southwestern coast of Greenland becomes Inuit. Now in 1721, a Norwegian churchman, actually from north of the Arctic Circle himself, named Hans Egede, persuades the Danish Norwegian crown and some moneyed powers in Denmark and Norway besides, to finance an expedition back to Greenland, presuming that the Norse-speaking colony is still there, and worried that because they haven't been heard from in 300 years, they might still be, horror of horror, Catholics. So he leads 3 ships in 1721 from Bergen uh, and finds that there is no more Norse settlement, but he begins the modern day Danish / Norwegian, politically Danish settlement of Greenland. Now, in 1814, following the Napoleonic Wars, the Kingdom of Norway leaves the Crown of Denmark, joins until 1905 with Sweden, but the former overseas colonies, the Faroe Islands, Iceland, and Greenland, remain with Denmark. Now, the Faroes and Greenland are still there to various different degrees, part of the Kingdom of Denmark, although with various different degrees of local autonomy. Iceland left in 1944 and became fully its own sovereign country again, the Republic of Iceland. So Greenlanders, as I understand it today, and of course I can't speak for them, largely favor eventual independence from Denmark, but are still unified with Denmark in terms of the sovereignty rests in Copenhagen. Now, I'm a linguist. I specialize again in the Old Norse language, which there are not many remnants of from Greenland, although curiously more runic inscriptions survive from Greenland than from Iceland, although a lot less. Actually, as far as I can recall, nothing in the Roman alphabet, while we have tons of literature in the Roman alphabet from Iceland. Of course, I read modern Scandinavian languages, and of course, I read the modern Scandinavian language headlines. And as someone with a foot in both worlds, it is just devastating in a way to read Scandinavian headlines asking questions like, is America the enemy now, right? And we're at a terrible juncture where this is a question that Scandinavians and Greenlanders could be asking themselves. There is no grounds for an American invasion of Greenland, and the very fact that it's being contemplated speaks to the way that one party in my country has been overtaken by obeisance to this rotten-brained leech who wants to, I don't know, rename it Trump land probably, and thinks probably that it's bigger than Africa. Greenland has been a good ally to us. Denmark has been a good ally to us. You can read an interesting book by David Howarth about the, what is it called? The sled patrol, about the Greenlanders and Danes and Norwegians and Brits and Canadians and Americans who actually fought armed engagements with Germany in Greenland as Germany was establishing weather stations during World War II to monitor weather in the Atlantic, of course, for naval operations. some heroic stories there. And of course, tracing from after that time, the late 1940s and 1950s, we have already an agreement that allows us to have bases there. And there's no reason whatsoever to doubt the commitment of Denmark and Greenland to the safety and liberty of the free world. So hopefully we move past that chapter, and hopefully some of this has been of some interest in providing some extra context about Greenland and its history. And I would love, by the way, to be able to provide you with a little bit more information about its language, but it is very difficult to find resources about it. Now, naturally, most of the resources that are available are in Danish, which is no problem for me, but getting books from Denmark is a problem for me right now. You know, I used to order tons and tons of books from Europe, and it's become more and more impossible to get them because of tariffs and other things. People don't even want to try to ship them. So if you have good information, I don't care if it's in English or Danish or what, that could help me get a little bit more information about Greenlandic, I'd love to get it, love to share it. And, you know, I certainly pick up information about languages fast. I don't think I'm going to become a proficient Greenlandic speaker. I'm more interested in perhaps a grammar of Greenlandic than a phrase book. And if you are yourself in possession of, you know, interesting information about the Greenlandic language or history of Greenlanders or culture of Greenland today, you know, of course, I'm always interested in interviewing experts on this channel about their own particular fields. That's something I've been doing for a long time, and a lot of people have taken advantage of that to get the word out about whatever their work is to a larger audience. So be happy to hear about that. There is a YouTube channel called Q's Greenland that I've enjoyed watching some shorts from that has a lot of fun information about just Greenland. You know, look at more pictures beyond the ones that you see on the AP headlines of whatever. It's been neat, and also been a nice opportunity to hear some of the Greenlandic language from a native speaker. So kudos to that channel, which is also on Instagram. And let us hope that I can bring you more information yet about Greenland in the years to come, and that it will be from the perspective of a scholar and not the inhabitant of an unnecessarily aggressively occupying nation. Well, for now, wishing everyone peace and freedom from beautiful Colorado, and wishing you, of course, all the best.